What is the dumbest solution to a problem that actually worked? One of my friends is a teacher and he was finding it hard to deal with his kids dabbing in class. So he started doing it in a super white dude awkwardly trying to fit in with no rhythm way. The kids stopped. I bought a set of couches from Art Van Furniture this summer, complete with 24-hour warranty and replacement service. Once delivered, I discovered that one of the legs arrived cracked. I spent some time on the phone with their customer service hotline, only to get 15 minutes worth of runaround. I decided to go back to the store with the broken leg in hand and just get a replacement. The customer service desk told me there was no way I could just get an extra leg from the store. I would need to file a claim over the phone, have my invoice number, etc, etc. I realized that I was dressed about the same as the delivery guys. So I walked into the loading bay and told the first guy I saw that I need another leg to match this one. He didn't ask any questions, just took one off of another matching couch and handed it to me. Add on. A tick crawled into the headphone jack of my phone. The next two searches on my phone were, what eats ticks? Guinea hen mating noises. After about 15 seconds of female guinea hen sounds, the tick crawled out of my phone. Genius. My car got pummeled in a terrible hailstorm. Little dents over every surface of the car. My insurance would only write it off as a total loss, and I didn't want to give the car up. A friend pointed out that since I live in the desert, the heat will likely fix a lot of those dents over time. That's exactly what happened. A year later, you had to look carefully to find dents where there used to be 100 of them. Ignoring the problem fixed it. Shoulder let them write it off as a total loss and then bought it back from them as a salvage title for $500. You'd never be able to sell it again, but you'd already have the money and it sounds like you wanted to keep it. Drove to a neighboring town 80 miles away with one burned out headlight. Remaining headlight went out while in said town. I had no money, and shops were closed regardless. These were dual beam, so although I had lost both headlights, the high beams worked. I didn't make it out of town with getting honked at and flashed repeatedly by angry passing motorists. And understandably so. What was I to do? I continued down the highway and made it about 15 miles before I'm pulled over by the first officer to see me. I explained the situation. Officer has no suggestions. This was before cell phones. Tells me I can go but that I won't make it home without getting stopped again. I pull over at the next exit. Get a free water. Dump it in the dirt. Make a thin mud. And smeared it over my lights. Worked like a charm. No more honks or flashes. Passed multiple officers. My psych professor told us about this patient. She was a woman in her late 40s. Suffering from OCD and paranoia. Every day while she drove to work, she would panic that she left her curling iron on, and it was going to burn her house down. So she would turn around, drive home, make sure it was unplugged, and then leave again. But as time went on she started making multiple trips home, sometimes in the middle of the day, and she was about to lose her job over this. No therapy was working. Her medications weren't working. Coping techniques weren't working. Nothing could calm this woman. Then she saw my professor, and my professor told her to bring her curling iron in the car with her. So if she got nervous that it was still plugged in, she could look over and see that it was next to her. Had to send in a letter once. The envelopes had no sticky adhesive and couldn't find the tape at home. My dad, who's pretty much as old as Confucius, just grabbed a grain of rice out of my bowl and used it as the adhesive. It worked so well. I couldn't connect to the Wi-Fi. My Wi-Fi adapter wasn't working right and wouldn't connect to anything. So I right-clicked on the adapter in the control panel. Click diagnose and Windows fixed it automatically. Only time I have seen it work. Windows 10? They changed the way it fixes things and will now do everything it needs to do to fix it. Up to the point of completely reinstalling Windows. It's been a godsend to just tell my mother to make Windows solve all her problems. Back in the day, hitting a TV or other appliance to make it work. Hell, even today it still works sometimes. Our family cat hated our family dog. Rubbed the dog all over with fresh catnip. New best friends. Something similar. We had a problem with my dog just trashing all of her toys as soon as she got them. So we put a stuffed rabbit, or something, in a bin with our dirty laundry. She loved that rabbit because it smelled like us. Never destroyed it. Just carried it around. My sister was hospitalized at 4 years old for a buildup of fluid in her head. She refused to drink any of the milk being offered by the hospital because it didn't have the cow and sunglasses on the side of the box that the other hospital's milk had. Her being a sick child in for literal brain surgery. The hospital went above and beyond, sending someone to the local grocery store to try and find this milk brand with the cow wearing sunglasses. When they never found it, I googled the image, asked if they had a printer, and taped the cow to the side of their milk carton. I still think it's adorable that worked. Bought a not chargeable iPhone 5S from a second-hand store for bargain. Used a toothpick to clean the contact. Phone is chargeable now and works perfectly. Similarly, my friend was gonna throw away his old iPod mini because it didn't work anymore and he had a new one. So I asked for it and he gave it to me. Swapped out the charging cable for another cable and it worked. The only broken thing was the original charger. I offered it back to him since it was never really broken. But he was kind and let me keep it since he already had a new one. It's not dumb now. But back in the 1850s when Jon Snow went around telling everybody that the London cholera outbreak was being caused by a water pump, it was seen as pretty ridiculous. Back then the leading theory on the cause of disease was that diseases were caused by miasmas or bad air. Jon Snow realized everybody that was getting cholera was also visiting this one water pump. So he got the city to replace it. Lo and behold, the cholera outbreak stopped. Nowadays doing this would probably be on par with suggesting you could stop Alzheimer's by sleeping without a pillow or something. There was a nursing home in Germany and the patients with dementia kept wandering off. They installed a fake bus stop in front of the nursing home so when dementia and patients got out of the building, they would go sit at the fake bus stop and wait for the non-existent bus. The bus stop was clearly visible from the main offices. So whenever staff saw someone out there, they would just go and retrieve them. Solved the problem completely. Wrapping your Xbox 360 in a towel and leaving it turned on caused some of the shitty connections on wiring to resolder themselves if you had the ring of death. Something daft like that anyway. Several months ago I was working in an ICU when a pipe burst in the ceiling and began to leak into my patient's room. The supervisor's solution was move him into the hall. However, that would have killed this particular patient. Thankfully, it had been a rainy weekend. So I propped my umbrella up on the patient and the water ran off harmlessly into the floor. The surgeon had a tiny heart attack when he saw it a bit later. But he got over it, I suppose. My house is about 100 years old with a basement. And the basement windows are just as old. A basement window kept popping open. And they opened to the inside. I noticed there were a few leftover 20 feet pieces of wood trim never used. So I placed one end on the bottom part of the window frame, bent the trim so it bows, and stuck the other end in the corner of the wall opposite. It holds true and fits like a glove. That was 4 years ago. And I promised myself I'm going to fix it properly tomorrow. Ignoring it and hoping it goes away. Worked with those creepy murder clowns last year. We were overhauling a centrifugal pump to replace the wear-rings. It's a pretty standard thing, but for some reason, when we reassembled it, the impeller wasn't rotating. We checked for the shaft key and if it was coupled to the motor properly. All fine. After 2 hours of trying everything possible, the trainee engineer just said, "What if we hit it with something?" We hit the casing with a sledgehammer a few times. Not too hard. The casing is made of cast iron. The fricking thing starts working. TLDR. Hit thing with hammer when not work. Makes it work. Back when I was in 6th form at school, we had new sofas in the common room, a room where our year could hang out and relax, work, listen to music on our time off. They had been there only a couple of days before one of the legs snapped off one of the sofas. Now we could have attempted to fix it, or just left it missing a leg, but there were often checks and cleaners moving furniture would have noticed it was broken and we would have got in trouble for not respecting school property. So we did the only sensible thing, which was break all the legs off the sofa. And then all the sofas in the room so they were all at the same height. We stashed the legs in the ceiling. And nobody knew a thing. Dumbus program director of our hospital decided for patient safety there should be no abbreviations in patients' charts and record. That goes for TURBT. LAVH. Surgical jargons that doesn't make sense to lay people. Which kind of makes sense, I guess. Then he went overboard and started to ask everyone to write out full names for cancer markers and lab data and their units. It worked. He was let go. I was at a hotel on a floor close to the top but not at the top. There were many people leaving from the levels above and as a result, it would take about 3 minutes or so for one person from our level to get onto the elevator. There was also a guy with a cart loaded with a giant suitcase attempting to go down and would not let anyone else who could potentially be able to fit onto the elevator get on. I had to leave within a few minutes or I would miss the bus which was heading to the airport and thus miss the plane. I proposed the stupid idea of going up, as everyone was waiting for the elevator to go down and from there, we would be able to skip the queue and go all the way down. It worked. And luckily, it did not stop at the original floor we were on, as the guy with the cart would probably not be too happy. I once owned a Subaru and drove a half-hour away to a friend's house. On the way home, the brakes lost all their fluid. When I stepped on the brake pedal, the car just coasted. This was in the middle of a blizzard. Nobody else was on the road. So in my head, it made the most logical sense to drive it home right then and there, rather than wait for a tow truck during a blizzard. I took back roads and stayed in first or second gear, 20 miles per hour at most, and braked to a stop with the emergency brake. It was really easy in retrospect. Dumb, but easy. That's why it's called an emergency brake. It relies on a cable so when your car's hydraulic brake system fails, you can still slow to stop. Takes a lot longer. Only pointing this out because I've actually heard people say they thought emergency brake meant use in case of emergency like hop. An accident happened in front of me and I need stop instantly pulley brake. Blowing into a Nintendo cartridge to get the game to work. I was in college with a real awful set of hand-me-down kitchen utensils. I had my heart set on making almond crusted fish for dinner one night but had no feasible way of crushing the almonds with the shitty knives in my drawer. So I put them in a plastic bag and wrapped them in a dish towel and ran them over with my SUV a few times in the parking lot. Voila. The fish came out great. My folks were in town, and my wife and I wanted to take them to dinner. We head to a nearby mediocre steakhouse at the request of my parents. And it's around 6:00 p.m. The hostesses tell us there's a minimum 45-minute wait. I get suspicious, as their parking lot had barely any cars. So I peek around into their dining area. There are several open tables that would fit a party of 4. Mildly annoyed, I ask the hostesses why we can't be seated at any of these tables. They reply that they're being held for future reservations. I get on my smartphone, open the Open Table app, make a reservation for 6:15 p.m. for a party of 4, and we're seated immediately. Getting onto the NJ Turnpike once, there was an attendant at each booth handing out something to each driver. I assumed that meant the machines that issue tickets indicating where you got on were broken. Turns out they were handing out pamphlets advertising Easy Pass, and I had skipped the functioning ticket machine. By turnpike rules, I would have to pay the full fee as though I had driven the entire length. As I approached my exit, I came up with a stupid plan. Act stupid. When I pulled up to the toll booth window, I said, against every grammatical fiber in my being, I ain't got no ticket. The attendant rolled her eyes and asked where I had entered. Playing dumb saved me about $5. I'm really late to this. But in my ecology class we learned about how there's a snake problem in Guam. Particularly brown tree snakes. The solution? Dropping dead mice laced with Tylenol attached to tiny streamer cardboard parachutes. Tylenol is poisonous to the snakes and the streamers attract their attention. It worked. The snakes ate the mice and it mitigated the snake problem that was affecting the native bird species. I was tested on this in my final exam. I used to work for DSW's IT department, doing a phone upgrade replacement for all their stores, 1,000 plus phones. All the phones in the stores fit in this little drawer underneath the cash registers for the cashiers to answer when you call the store. During the first install, after they have already bought all the phones, we realize that the phones don't fit into these little drawers. There is also nowhere else to put them for cashiers to use. The project manager almost tear brick. After a week of thinking about it, my team had a solution. Door stops. We bought a pallet of door stops from one of 2 companies that we could find that sell door stops in bulk in the US. We glued them to the back of the phones to angle them enough to fit in the little drawers for the cashiers. Remember that the next time you are in a DSW checking out. Use the wax from a Babable cheese round to secure the license plate tucked in the back window. It was a rental and we didn't want to scratch anything up by putting the plate on. But the racket was driving me crazy. 2 chunks of wax on the corners and I could sleep on the road trip. I also used it on my screen door in the same way because the weather stripping was worn out and my landlord was a cheap ass. Stop the rattling. 2 men are riding their weary horses through the desert, desperate for water and relief from their journey. They view their destination, but lament that their dragging pace will not get them there quickly. One says to the other that he thinks his horse to be slower but he disagrees. They bet to each other for which horse goes slower. Their pace drops more as the 2 men are now motivated to get there last. A traveling merchant passes them on the road and questions this madness. He couldn't believe these men could be so stupid but he understood them nonetheless. The merchant rode along chatting with each man in turn for a few minutes. And then he suggested a simple solution. Switch horses. Paraphrased from Milton Friedman or some other. My stepdad was taking a sat-nav back to the shop as it was acting strange but the bloke serving him refused to take it as the warranty only covers physical damage, not accidental damage, so he just drop-kicked it lightly and the bloke just casually said that'll do sir and went out back to get a replacement. Wasn't too sure what to think about that. This was before high-speed internet. We had to transfer a database between 2 cities 500 kilometers apart and we had only one night to do it. People started searching how to compress the files and rent several expensive digital lines, I think ISDN, to spread the copy. Then someone said why don't we remove the hard drive out of the server and move it there by car? So I drove 500 kilometers during the night to deliver the disk and mount the new database. I read this somewhere so I'm not sure if it's true but an airport was having complaints that luggage was taking too long to get to baggage claim. The airport solution was to move baggage claim even farther away from the gates. The complaint stopped because a lot of the time spent waiting was now spent just walking there. The actual time it took to get your luggage wasn't any faster.